Hey guys, welcome to the MVP Coach's Corner where bro logic comes to dies, covering nutrition, contest prep, PEDs, personal experiences, coaching, and living the bodybuilding industry. So how are both you guys doing today? It's fucking Saturday.
Great, we're
It's a
gonna
pretty good
train
Saturday.
legs soon.
I'm gonna get to train one of my clients, and I'm very excited to do that.
The
We're gonna
closest
Because
thing to lifting yourself for a little bit.
okay, that was a little hurt.
On the bright side, you
Yeah.
can help him load the weights.
Yeah,
On the
you
bright
can
side,
do.
I can make him do the punishment that I want him to be hitting.
Yeah. This is the equivalent of cuckolding with weightlifting.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah. I would say that's a good way to put an analogy.
You can't physically fuck the weights. So you're gonna watch someone else go fuck the weights. I got it.
Yeah.
And Bree, me and you got glutes today.
Yes, we have glutes. I'm pumped.
I definitely wore the shorter shorts I own for this, so I hope you guys are ready.
Dude, I can wear the shorts that went viral for somebody.
I'm about to have Ross.
I can't promise they still fit.
Well, I'll
We need
record.
to get the we need to get the Project AD ones, man.
Yeah, true.
We
You
do.
guys all want
No,
them
you know what we gotta do a T-bar row while wearing a thong and post
Yeah.
it on Instagram.
Stop.
I played the fifth on this.
No, you know the video I'm talking about.
I sent it to you.
I don't know what you're talking about. No idea.
Okay.
All right, back on topic.
All I have to say
So
it is a 50 Cent lyric. That 50 Cent does say a lot.
that is true. So today's episode is about taking the time to grow and not jump starting into a prep.
So I think
Where
we
do you want
all
to start
know
with this?
someone. Yeah, so I think we all personally have seen people do this.
Yes.
And I think the biggest thing is from a motivation perspective.
Mhm.
And the reason why I say that is like I'll use myself, for example. When I was 19, I did my first bodybuilding show. And was I big enough to do bodybuilding when I was 19? Probably not. Also, when I started competing, there was only bodybuilding and women's bikini. That was it. There's only two categories really, and women's physique and bodybuilding. There wasn't anything else. So we only had those divisions to kind of go into. But at 19 years old, I didn't have a structured diet until I started prep. I didn't have a structured workout until I started prep. So I made more progress physically in prep than I made any time leading up to prep. At 19, number one, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I used having a contest prep as like a carrot, right? Like that was the target goal. So it gave me something to work towards. And I think a lot of people kind of do that. They almost just pick a show because they know it's going to make them lock in and do the things they have to do. Compared to like just taking the time aside and carrying that same discipline into an off season and focusing on growing. And like what happens is that person generally does look better, obviously, as that prep progresses. But what happens is they're just losing fat, right? They're not really progressing in the sport per se, and they're not putting on more tissue. And in reality, like dieting down, especially down to like a prep weight, isn't the best thing from a metabolic perspective. You're taking a lot of steps backwards a lot of times.
Yeah.
So like, I guess let's break this up into segments. Let's talk about one of the first reasons why to possibly hold off on getting into a prep. I think the very first one I would always possibly talk about is just building enough tissue.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time people don't have enough tissue going into it. I think it's more so affected based on like the social media that we're in right now and like how big it is. So you have these people who come out of the woodwork who've been doing it for 5-10 years, training consistently, dieting, stuff like that for 5 years, but they don't post anything about it until
Yep.
they know they're ready and they're already working with a coach who's now knows their body most of the time. Or sometimes they're genetically gifted and they kind of are able to do some things on their own and it just works because they're genetically gifted. But that's only so many people.
Yeah, and they see all these people on like Instagram, and they're like, oh, like I want to do that, let's do it now. And they have this timeline. Well, oh, like I want to do it before my birthday, or something like that. And they haven't taken the time to actually really train and grow before getting into that period. So once they do, they don't have much when you get into the depths of prep. So
No, I have to agree. I have to agree. And the thing is, like, this is a bunch of different classes for a specific reason, right? Like, there isn't just bodybuilding because that's the thing, right? We have a bunch of classes that someone could try out before going into whatever class they want to compete in, right? Like, for example, we now have women's bikini, we have men's physique, we have men's classic physique, we have women's wellness, we have all the other classes now that we didn't have in the past. So we kind of can be a little more patient and still kind of still actively compete to an extent, but we can in essence be more appropriate for each class. So like I'll use bikini for example, or men's physique. So both these classes have the least amount of muscle required to enter the classes, right? Not saying there are not people in those classes that have a lot of muscle, because at the highest level of men's physique, they're pretty much bodybuilders with shorts, and I won't take a single thing away from
Yeah.
it. And most of them, underneath those legs, underneath their shorts, still have decent legs. They just choose not to compete in the class where they're judged on them. And same thing with women's bikini. You have women's bikini competitors at the highest level at the Olympia that do have great amount of muscle. They're not massive, they're not very big, but they do have a good amount of muscle. But at the local amateur level, those are the classes that require the least amount of muscle. So a lot of people, I feel like in general, think they may fall into other classes that they really don't yet, just because of what they perceive, how they look in their off season, and what they see on social media, and they believe they can fall in other classes. And that's actually what I was trying to do right now. Is I was actually trying to pull up a photo as a nice comparison tool. To,
I have some.
no, I'll pull one up real quick. But I'll use like the class of wellness for example. Um, like wellness in my mind is one of the probably the harder classes for women to actually fit into nowadays. And it's strictly because the amount of muscle required to be really great at wellness. And we look at the musculature of some of these women, especially even at a higher amateur level. They have as much muscle tissue on the lower body as male bodybuilders. And I think the big misconception is for a lot of people in general, especially ladies that are bottom heavy, that hold a lot of fat in the lower half,
Mhm.
is they have big legs. So they assume that when they diet down, that the legs would be kind of similar in size to what they are now. And just like men who hold most of our fat in our midsection, unfortunately, ladies, due to the hormones and genetics, hold a lot of fat in the lower body. So if we're sitting at 20% or 18% body fat and we're dieting down to 10 as a lady, let's say you're 150 pounds, you're losing about 15 to 30 pounds off your legs.
Mhm.
A lot of weight to lose, especially mostly losing it in select areas. So those things change a lot in size, shape, and structure.
Right.
Especially when it comes down to like you don't know what muscle is really underneath it at first.
Exactly.
Especially if you're just starting. Unless you're genetically extremely lean, then you kind of have a somewhat of an idea, but you don't have a full idea because you carry fat. Everyone carries fat in different ways. Like
Exactly.
It was like my
I'll
first
use
check-in
myself first.
picture.
Mm-hmm.
There really wasn't much there. I mean, in my eyes now. Um, but and then obviously like we uncovered everything, and my legs were pretty small, on the smaller side, especially for my division. But
Well, like, but you still fit the mold, right?
right,
Like,
like I still had the shape, but
You had the silhouette to match it. That's the thing.
I'm
The
just
silhouette of the class. That's what I'm referring to.
What?
I'm gonna
The silhouette of the class.
Yes.
exactly. For example,
Yeah,
like
if you have, yeah,
you
you
don't
can
have
go.
to
If you have
be
the shape, then
here. I'm gonna pull up. I'm sure you know Anna Markowski, whatever her name is, Extreme Woman.
Mhm.
So like I like using her as the example, and it's strictly because like, a lot of people feel like they fit into a class like wellness, and we look at like her tie-ins and the amount of muscle she has on her hamstrings, the amount of muscle she has on her glutes. Like you have the amount of lower body development as again as a male open bodybuilder. Like you have to think about it. Like you're literally having 25-inch, 26-inch legs.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
that takes a lot of time, and if you didn't actively train to fit in that division, it just is going to take a few years, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Just like most men, after 1 or 2 years of lifting, unless they've been very serious, they're probably not going to fit in bodybuilding for a little bit.
Right.
And like I would almost say women's wellness is probably carrying the same amount of tissue as almost women's physique competitors now. They're just distributed differently. They're just much more lower body heavy.
Yeah, I'd say it's more lower body dominant compared to anything else. I mean, because they kind of go for a softer look up top
Yeah,
for the most part. I mean, you're don't get me wrong, you're still conditioned out of your ass for it, but it's more of a softer look up top and
mhm,
harder throughout the lower half.
exactly. And but it takes that much time. Like again, like the amount of tissue that you have in your lower body takes a lot of time, and that's why like it's super important to make sure that you're ready to compete in this like class that you want to. Not saying that like you'll ever be fully ready, right? I know that's one of the
Right.
other topics we want to talk on is
Yeah.
you don't have to wait until you're fully ready. I'm not saying you have to have serrated glutes before you compete in wellness, right? Like that's not the standard.
Not the
Um,
class.
yeah, exactly. But like in reality, is that like should you somewhat look like the silhouette of the class you're trying to compete in? For sure, for sure. And there's nothing wrong with underestimating, right? Like again, like I did when my first show was 19. A lot of us do it when we do our very first show,
Mhm.
but there's a time and place to obviously take the time aside to focus on growing. And that's the next thing. Like I would like us to go into is where are our calories at,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's a big one.
I'm sure a lot of you've noticed this when you probably first start working with me or Coleman when we get new clients. A lot of the first things that we do, especially if competing is on the horizon at one point, is seeing where their calories are at and trying to raise their caloric ceiling. Um, and by that I mean is that all right, cool. Like this person's maintenance calories is 2,600. How can I get their maintenance higher? Because like
Without really using anything else.
yeah, because like the
Just
best case
by
scenario is going into a prep with the highest amount of food possible, the lowest activity possible, at a place where your body fat isn't an extreme one or the other. Because
yeah,
you're in the best case scenario to mobilize fat and lose fat, and you're going in with all these calories, so you have all this room to play with and take away that you really wouldn't had if you just walked in the prep at 2,600 calories.
And that's why people are so miserable in their preps is because they don't do that. And they just, take the off season, do whatever. And then they're like, oh, okay, like I'm going to get back with my coach or whatever. And then prep sucks because of that.
yeah, I mean, you should be pushing your food up as high as you can the entire time. I think we started
Yeah.
my prep last year for like a personal experience. We were dieting on 9 cups of pasta a day.
Yeah.
Nine cups of pasta for like the first like I don't even think we changed. I think all we did was add in 20 minutes of cardio at first because I had zero cardio,
Mhm.
um, zero. I think I did like 3,000 steps a day, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. Like that was what it was during the off season. I stayed lean the entire time, um,
Mhm. And
appropriately
that's
lean,
the
I would
thing, is,
say.
like, that's the best case scenario, right? Like being able to diet on as much food as possible. Now, not everyone's gonna get their food up in 9 cups of pasta a day. Like, let's be very real. Like, I was never that person that got their food that high. Um, I've had my actually, I guess close to it, but never really pasta. It was always more rice and rice derivatives. Um, but that being said, like the best case scenario is walking in the prep with that because, like Bree said, that if you're walking in the prep with a very low amount of food, you only have so much to take away. And how high are you going to push your cardio, right? Are you going to go 90 minutes? Are you going to go to 2 hours? You're going to have 2 hours plus steps. Like, what are you going to do to continually make progress if you're going in with such a low amount? And that's why, like, I almost rather have someone be a fat fuck in their off season and eat a bunch of shitty stuff and just train hard, because at least they're not, again, at least they're going in with a decent amount of calories, right?
Yeah.
Compared to like the person who's not, who, for example, I hate eating. Like, I don't enjoy eating 7 meals a day. I don't fucking enjoy it. It's not fun for me.
I want 8.
Yeah, I do.
I want 8 so bad.
You
Yeah,
might get it.
well, like,
You might get it.
yeah. Well, like, you enjoy eating. I generally hate it, and that's why, like, I laughed when Dexter Jackson did one of his last interviews before he retired. They're like, "What are you most excited for?" He was like, "Not to eat," and that made so much sense to me because, like, again, for what we do, our whole life we're out there and eating. So, like, I feel like a lot of people who don't work with someone in their off season actually undereat more so than they do overeat. And from the perspective is that they may have more calories some days, but it's not like they're purposely increasing calories. They're just spontaneously having days where they eat shittier stuff. And
Yeah,
the
it's
days
like
you
not
eat-
consistent.
yeah, and like, let's be
Not
very clear.
consistent. Your macros and your micros are not going to be accurate every day. I mean,
Yeah,
and then you'll have days where like you think you need a refeed, but in reality, you really don't. Like
yeah.
you just want that,
Mhm.
but you really don't need that to help with your metabolism.
And let's be very clear, like, most like unhealthy food someone's going to eat are going to be mostly fat dense, right? They're not going to be carb dense or protein dense. The most calories going to come from fat. Like, we look at like most common cheat meals. Like, we look at like a burger. Like, a burger at like, the average price is like 30 grams plus of fat, not including cheese or fries, right? We talk about having pizza. Most of the calories come from fat. Talk about donuts or a lot of sweetened things. Most of the calories are coming from fat. So, like, it's not like you're
Cookies.
getting, yeah, like cookies. Like, again, most of the calories come from fat, right? So,
No.
like, it's not like you're having like a bunch of like chicken and rice meals that are equal in calories, but also have like the correct amino acid profile to encourage muscle growth.
Mhm.
Like, I definitely think like that's a big misconception is like, or I guess biggest thing that people need to wait for is to increase their caloric ceiling. So if you're in your off season and you're not working with someone, like, I would set something like a goal as almost like a half pound per week as a weight gain goal. And whenever that stops, especially if you're not in a place that like that you're overly soft, bump up calories mildly, possibly like 50 calories a week, until you start moving at that pace again. I don't like doing small jumps, and like Coleman knows this from working with me. There's times I bump up people's calories or rice 100 grams a week, and that is it. Talking about 26 carbohydrates, talking like roughly 100 calories being bumped up. And like, we may do that and sit for 2 weeks, and then weight will stabilize again, and then we'll do it again. So like, the
Yeah,
biggest goal,
it's
again, increase the ceiling without getting fat too much, like without getting extremely fat.
yeah. I think the bigger jumps are also smarter in a longevity standpoint, just because you can do one change. Like
Mhm.
you're gonna see a little bit of water and everything the week after, just stuff like that. Just waiting for it to stabilize out, but you're really gonna see it in 2 weeks. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna see a real difference in like you'll see it with their physique because now you have you have 10 days of training on top
Mhm.
of that with all that food.
Yeah.
You don't just have 5, so you have double the amount of time to see where you're making the real difference.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
someone's getting softer at that point, all you have to do is pull back 50% of what you bumped,
Yeah. I like,
and then you
let's,
have a better guesstimate of like
yeah.
where they need to go.
So like, I'll use like Alexa, for example. Was one of our clients who is going to be competing in bikini this year, and she already has a lot of food for a girl her size. She's eating a very impressive amount of food, and we gave her a refeed this week that would resemble almost the amount of food an open male bodybuilder would eat.
Yeah, it's
400-gram
pretty close
rice
to.
with all her meals, 2-ounce proteins with all her meals. She had what, a shake with 3 bananas too.
No. So she had. I can give you the whole meals.
Yeah.
Meal one, 2 eggs, 80 grams cream of rice. Meal two, 2 ounces of chicken, 400 grams of rice. Meal three, 2 ounces of chicken, 400 grams of rice. Meal four, 3 ounces, 90 10 gram beef, 400 grams of rice. Her snack was 3 oranges and 1 scoop of whey, and then her second snack was 170 grams of Greek yogurt, non-fat, and 300 grams of berries from whichever one she wanted, because they're all
Yeah.
pretty much equivalent.
Exactly. So like we look at that, and at the net end result for that week was a 1.7 pound drop or 1.5 pound drop in that week. And which is like cool to see, because like again, there's always gonna be a thermic effect from food as well. Especially this was the week going into a deload. So in essence, like the best case scenario. So we saw a weight drop going into a deload. So we know that when in essence when we start her new split, she's gonna be fully rested and recovered. And what we're probably going to do is mimic that refeed and see if we get a similar response, because I would love to be able to increase our food closer to what those numbers actually were in a refeed as a day-to-day scenario if
Yeah.
she can handle that from a digestive perspective, because I understand that is a lot of food for a 130 pound plus girl.
Yeah, she's not the biggest girl, but she can eat. That's definitely for sure.
Yeah.
And she also said she's got hunger cues this week as well after following the refeed. So
Yeah.
that's another thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, best case scenarios. So that brings us right into the next thing, which is fixing metabolic issues. So this kind of goes from like a bunch of different things and can stem from a bunch of places. So the first place like I'll go into is just like I'll call it diet fatigue, right? Someone who chronically lived with low calories, possibly because they wanted to look a certain way on social media all the time, or possibly because they never got as lean as they wanted to, so they kept their calories very low for a long period of time. I'm talking about you ladies who sit around like 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day. Because that's what you number one, like I'll blame the USDA to start with, because like the USDA for some reason still recommends women to be around that. I don't know why. But let's start with that. So again, going back to increasing the caloric ceiling, right? So like if you're someone who's chronically dieting and chronically been under eating, things like T3 and T4 can be downregulated. And so we definitely need to make sure that we kind of focus on making sure we're in a better situation. This also can be insulin resistance as well. Now, these typically aren't coming from my people who are under eating. They're often coming from my new clients who didn't live the healthiest lifestyle. And this is why I think blood work is one of the most important things, even if you're working with natural clients,
Yeah.
because there's cues that you can miss. So like I'll use one of my clients recently, and he gave me fairly old blood work when we started. It was about 3 months old. I didn't really think anything of it because he's in essence was doing the same stuff. We were working with the same coach before I picked him up. So I didn't think anything of it. He wasn't running any PEDs. He wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. But weight was not moving the way I wanted to. So the first thing that came in my head was, I think this guy's insulin resistant.
Right.
So instead of just telling him that's what I thought, I just made him get blood work. And
Yeah.
when it came back, his glucose was about 117 fasted. So we're definitely insulin resistant. He had a 12-hour fasting window and it still came up as that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was like, okay, like we need to fix this ASAP. We're not doing anything else before that. We are not going to implement any PEDs before that. We're going to strictly focus on fixing your insulin resistance before we go into any type of phase. And like if you didn't do that, or if you didn't fix your insulin resistance and you expected to enter directly in the contest prep, you're in essence trying to diet with one hand behind your back the whole time.
Right.
And like I understand, like we all have timelines that we want to hit, but like I personally would not want, number one, try to do that. I would not allow a client to do that. And because also like you're gonna have a really shitty experience. You're gonna have to eat less food than you normally would have. You're gonna be fighting an uphill battle the whole entire time. So it's better just to get healthy before you do that. And it's the same exact thing with someone with shitty blood work, right? Not having the best like values, possibly because what they did last prep, possibly because what they ran in their off season, or they think it's the time to push. And going into prep with your blood work already in a not so good situation It's just asking for unforeseen
Yeah,
circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
asking for a lot of problems just to pop up,
Yeah, and like
and
there's a
that
time to push, right? Like I'll say that if you're a top end athlete and you really think this is your year to get your pro card, and maybe things are not bad, but they're not the best, then yeah, maybe I'm not saying neglect your health markers, but let's just say your AST is like 70, and you again not the worst. Like it could be much worse. We took so think like things like Accutane. Accutane put your AST in the hundreds, let alone in the 70s. Let's say your liver
yeah,
enzyme is slightly elevated. Maybe your bun and creatine are a little elevated. Nothing crazy. Yeah, I wouldn't say if you think this is your year to push and you're going in the prep, like okay, like that's an okay scenario. But for my regular person, like you or I, who's going to be doing a local show, I don't use that as a measuring tool. I would like us to have crispy clean blood work before going into it. Because again, like this is a sport, it's all about longevity. There's no sprinting here. There's people who do sprint and we see them burn out and they develop health issues and they have nowhere else to go beside pushing, right?
yeah. And pushing is not. I mean, sometimes it is the right move, but there's
Mhm.
also you come down to how long you've been in it, how far you've been, and how far you think you can actually push before health markers get to a certain point where it's like you have to pull back super hard to then just go back to normal.
Yeah. I'll use
And
the health marker.
there's no such thing as going back to normal, obviously. I mean, but I'm saying back to a better range to then try and push again.
Yeah. Oh, let's say there are normals, right? Because like we can definitely fall back into where you should be as being
Mm-hmm.
a male, right? But like let's focus on a marker of HDL, right? Like for those who don't know, like HDL is your good cholesterol, right? Now there are a couple of compounds that we call cardiovascularly toxic. Two of the three of the ones that initially come to my mind are aromasin, arimidex, and anavar. All three of these can lower your HCl significantly. Now, all three of those are commonly used during contest prep. Now, the thing about lipids is that lipids typically take a long time to change. You're not improving someone's HCl 30 points in a month, or 30 points in 2 months, or 3 months, or 4 months, probably. Like, it takes a long time for lipids to improve. I don't care what you do, you can throw the whole kitchen sink at it. It takes a long time. It's more of a time thing, of doing the right activity, eating the right foods, taking the right supplements. But if you finished your contest prep and you did post contest prep blood work, maybe 2, 3 months following a show, and your HDL is still like, so the range, you should be above 40. That's the range. You should be above 40. If you're leaving if you're 3 months post show, your HDL still is like 17. Like in my mind, that wouldn't be a time to push. You know what? Let's take the next couple months to focus on improving this number. I'm not saying I'm expecting this person to go over 40. We're pushing PEDs, right? They're probably not going to get back to a somewhat normal level for a little bit. But maybe when it comes to the plan formatting, I would avoid the use of these cardiovascular drugs. Maybe I'll keep your testosterone lower so I do not have to use aromas and arimidex. Maybe instead of using things like Anavar, I'm going to use other DHT derivative drugs. Maybe I'm going to use Mastron or Primo instead because they're not cardiovascularly toxic. And that's more so what I'm talking about is that if we're going to enter a contest prep and we know what drugs are commonly used during contest prep and we know what markers they interact with, it's be intelligent to make sure that those markers are in check or in range before going into prep because we know that those numbers are only going to get worse with time and only going to get worse as long as prep pushes and not even including the obviously the drug exposure during prep, but the physiological stress of what prep does to the body. And then you could even see with natural clients that sometimes natural clients, even though blood work gets skewed a good amount from prep. We see this with hormones. We see this often with thyroid function. But I think that that's one of the big things is making sure that we are completely healthy before going into prep. Because it's one of the most physically stressful things that your body's ever going to go through.
Yeah, great. And especially for a female and her cycle as well, not not only just metabolic issues, but hormonal as well.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
yeah, it's an even trickier route
Hmm.
And
for
let's
the
talk
most
about like,
part.
yeah, especially like the common things that like females deal with, like PCOS being a very common one now. And like PCOS, for those who don't really know, PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And with women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, things like, for example, like testosterone normally elevated with estrogens typically downregulated, progesterone's typically downregulated. So like it'd be better to enter prep for people like this if we can get those hormones in a better place. Now, normally they're not going to get, again, because due to their condition, the hormones won't always be the same as a regular female who does not have PCOS, but you can get them very close to it. And it would be unwise to enter a very strict dieting scenario if you couldn't, because those hormones are only going to change as prep evolves. Because you look at what fat is, fat by itself, like body fat, is highly estrogenic. So as body fat goes down, estrogen levels typically go down as well. Now, on top of that, we're going to talk about the removal of calories from someone's diet. Some of those calories may be coming from fat as well. So we're possibly removing some of the things that a female needs to even make the sex hormones, not even talking about the physiological part that's going to happen from just removing fat off the body. So like that's extremely important. So Bree, thank you for bringing it up. But yes, you're absolutely right, especially for females, making sure that blood work is in a very good place, because in general, dieting a woman is not the same as dieting a male, and there's a lot more that kind of goes into play with it. The runway is only longer as well. You typically should take your time dieting a female a little longer than you would dieting a male, due to there's a lot more things that can come up that normally don't come up with men. Especially we talk about like how menses can actually affect a week during prep, right? From a fat loss perspective, and also obviously a performance based perspective.
Right.
Love it, love it.
Sorry, just responding back to one of our clients.
No worries. But like this goes into the next thing, is that like if you are working with a coach, giving a coach plenty of time to figure out how you work. And this is why like a lot of coaches, like not just myself, a lot of coaches work this way, that you just can't hire them just for a prep. Like there's people who've done it with us. Because if
I
someone's
think they were
ambitious,
just. I think it was just those were
I'm not
rare
gonna,
case
no.
scenarios.
And that's the thing,
Yeah,
is if someone's excited, dude. Like I'm not the guy who wants to stomp on someone's fire. Like I'm not that person. But I will be realistic, and you've seen this with me be like, no, we're not doing that. But it's one of those things that if you are working with someone, you need to give them time to learn your body, and this is why often like, and people who are dieting down, especially if it's the first time working with them, like I don't want to just do one show with them. And
no,
and you've seen this with each client. Their
I
peak
think
is
I think what I wish we did last year with Connor is I wish we did one show before we did his second show,
yeah,
and I think that definitely could have. I mean, just because we didn't know how he was going to react,
yeah. And but
but
we now know that he needs
very
no food.
yeah, he needs like nothing, which is a great thing for him. Well, I mean, a great
Yeah,
thing, but
I
also
would
not a good
rather be
thing.
in his situation. I would. I am him when it comes to that. I
Yeah.
never eat much. Like my last show, I had 3 burgers over the course of a whole week. Like I was not you, Coleman, at all. Like I am
Two at
the
a time.
yeah, no, I am the minimal needed to fill out. I don't need much. And then that's the place I'd rather be. But like going back to that is, people coach hop a lot post show and directly after the show after they don't place the way they want. But this goes much deeper than that, because you have to give your coach time to learn your body in your off season. This is why I strongly believe that meal plans are superior to macro-based dieting, because you're giving someone the ability to see how certain select foods work with you. So I also can learn how these foods are going to interact during a peak as well. Um, that being said, like it'll also give your coach time to increase the metabolic ceiling we talked about, right? Slowly increasing calories leading up to this prep. So you're not going into prep with poverty calories. This also, again, working with a coach for a long enough time, taking on your body, also allows them to read and adjust your blood work, right? They can adjust your dosages, your drugs, and supplements to make sure that these things end up in a great place. I think that's the combo of all of it. Like everything we talked about, like if you were working with the proper person, you give them time, all those things they should be handling for you in essence.
Yeah, because when it comes down to it, like any coach could be a good coach.
Yeah.
But if you don't have enough time with that single person, you really don't know what's going to happen until you see like the biomarkers and everything like that on the inside. They could be getting crazy good looking exterior, but on the inside they could be totally like in the dumps.
Yeah.
And they're just going to say they're feeling fine, but because they think it's just prep, like, oh, I feel this way because of prep, I'm fine. But really, on the inside, you could be having tons of issues going on. We've been there before with me. I thought I was fine during my first prep with Mark, and everything was going pretty well. I mean, and then I just felt off like the one day, and then I went to gastroenterologist. I think it was a gastro. I went to a gastro, and I had them pull some bloods for me, and ended up finding out I had genetic liver failure called Wilson's disease and stuff like that, which literally was just triggered from dieting.
Yeah.
It was just triggered from dieting, and all we had to do is pull back for 2 weeks, and everything went back to normal.
Yeah, and again, like
that's still 2 weeks that we had to pull back. So then you have to give away. That's like even now you can put into like a timeline, affects the timeline. I was pretty persistent on where I wanted when I wanted to, but I didn't have a picked out show. I had an idea of when.
Yeah,
and but with that and being like not picking my own timeline, we had to pull back 2 weeks to go back forward, which was not a big thing. But I mean, for most people, it like for most first time competitors, that's like a huge deal.
Yeah.
Because they have their mind so
like,
set on that one, like we're doing this, and like that's what they go to the gym every day, and they're like, this is the date that I'm doing it. This is what we're going for. So it's like when that changes, it's like, oh crap.
Yeah, when you have that infatuation with the date and the timeline. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is great to have a timeline date.
Right.
I think that's a good idea, just to have like but it should be able to be moved.
Right. Like there should just be an overall
based on when you're ready and when you're not. Because sometimes you can be ready super early, and sometimes you can be ready 2 weeks after that date, and that's just how the cards fall. So you gotta really play it at that point.
Yeah.
That's why 2 shows is also a good idea too.
I look at it this way: when it comes to billion-dollar contracts, when you're building shit, timelines get pushed back all the time. All the time. You doing your first local show can be adjusted like the timeline of opening a billion-dollar complex. Like it's not going to kill you. You're not going to lose money on it unless you already paid for that show. And this is also why I have never paid for a show before the week of, ever.
Me too.
I have never done that.
He made fun of me.
Yeah, I know, Coleman. You buy yours in advance. I have never done that once in my life.
No, I did it.
3 months.
No, I did it. Nope. Big Cat and
you bought your
ticket and Texas.
Okay, Texas was 5 weeks away. That was fair. That's a fair. We knew we were gonna do it regardless because I was gonna be there. We knew we were gonna push me for another show.
Yeah, well, we knew that. But my thing is, I have never ever booked a show in advance because out of fear that I had to push it back. I am way too cheap just to throw away money. I won't do it. I'm sorry. I will.
I think during that second half of the prep too, I think I probably asked you like 3 or 4 times a week. I was like, "Are you sure this is the right move?"
Yes.
After I already paid for it,
paid for it the day of your first show.
Before he went back on for the night show, he already booked.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was right after I had just got off the stage for prejudging for light heavyweights. I kind of knew where I sat there, and well, I didn't really know exactly where I sat because it was just in the first call out, so I really didn't know. I mean, I figured I was somewhere in the top 5, wasn't sure where because of how they were moving people, and so I kind of had an idea. I knew I wasn't in the center, so I knew I didn't win, but I had no idea. So I just kind of was like, I was like, well, I didn't win this show. we might as well do another one. And I think Connor had just sent his check-in pictures, and I was sitting backstage, and we were going through Connor's stuff just before I had to go down for Classic, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna do Texas. And then I went on to TexasBodybuilding.com, signed all my stuff, and paid. And then after I got off for Classic, I told my mom, and my mom was like, you're kidding me, right? And I was like, well, I had to be there anyways, so.
Yep.
And I was like,
I remember hearing
and
about
also,
that.
I think also the other thing was like, it was Connor's first show. He's a little 18-year-old kid. I was like, this could be like a once in an experience for him. Like he has to prep with his coach
Brother
or
bonding.
with one of his coach.
So those watching this, if you didn't know, in the 80s, there used to be father and daughter and mother and son bodybuilding competitions.
Oh, they did that
I
at Texas.
didn't
That was the
know that.
coolest thing ever.
Yes,
Grandfather and grandson.
that used to be an actual division. And
That was the coolest thing ever.
one of my favorite bodybuilders was Lee Priest. Lee Priest got in the bodybuilding because his mom was a bodybuilder, and they used to do son and daughter. I mean, sorry, son and mother
Mother.
building competitions. Could you imagine nowadays that being a thing? Oh my god, that'd be pretty fucking awesome.
I remember Connor asked backstage. He was like, "You think they'll let us go out on stage? Like, considering you're my coach?" And I was like, "If you ask, I'll do it." I was like, I don't think they're gonna let it fly. I was like, but if you ask, I was like, totally, I'll go out and do the same exact thing they just did with the grandfather and grandson, which was like the coolest thing. And they did like a whole pose down and everything like that. It was cool.
That's awesome.
I like that.
Yeah. No, that was really.
I think
fucking
he was like, I think that kid was like 16 too.
He was like 16. He competed in Connor's class. Yeah, I think he was like 16, and
Yeah, he was young.
the grandfather did the highest level of masters. So whatever.
I think it was 70.
Yeah, whatever. He again, like, it was really fucking cool to see. It was really fucking.
He still
cool.
looks sick for 70 years old. I'll give him that.
Hey man, like being able just to do that 7 years old is a win by itself, right? Like how many 7-year-olds can't do basic stuff, let alone wake up every day and do faster cardio. So like, hey, if you're doing that already, like again, major props.
Yeah.
But that goes into the next thing for me is making sure you are mentally ready and financially prepared. Now, I will touch on guys first, and Bria, I will let you take by women. Males, especially if males you are enhanced, this would be the most expensive thing you will ever do. And the reason why I say that is because not even talking about the health products that normally you're taking with PEDs, but depending on who you're working with as a coach, you may get blood work semi-regularly throughout your prep to make sure you're in a good place. Also, the obvious amount of food you consume is going to slightly change through prep. So if anything, your food bill may go down compared to what it is in your season. But a lot of like contest drugs used in general are slightly more expensive than what you would use in your off season based on the compounds that you are using. And also like show day expenses. Was it like $100 a register per class now?
Texas was 125 a class. New Jersey, I think, was like Pennsylvania was like 150, if I remember.
Yeah.
I think it was 300 for both for Big Cat, and then I paid like I think it was like 225 for Texas for both classes, and I actually ended up adding a class. At first it was 125, and then I added a class in, so it was like 100 for a crossover. So it was like when you add a crossover, it's like $100.
Yeah. About say 125 a class. Around that, right? 120. So let's say 125
plus your membership.
Yeah. So if you're doing open and novice,
135,
250 between the two of that, doing open and novice. You're doing obviously for the membership is 150. You said right?
135 this year.
135 this year. So your NBC card. Luckily for men, posing trunks are pretty cheap. You can literally buy them for as low as like $45. And you can buy them obviously for much more than that. The more customized and better quality you do get. And then
no, it is 150 this year.
150. Okay.
Right,
all right, it's 150 this year for your card. And then tanning is like another 100 to 150 based on the venue as well. So it adds up pretty quickly. We're talking about minimum $500 show day.
Yeah, that's not even including traveling there or.
Yeah. traveling. And the thing about this is like, for example,
Airbnb, hotel.
And yeah,
mhm,
and then girls have their suits are literally like the cost of a prom dress. And
yeah.
then makeup, hair, nails, whatever, all that extra
You
jazz,
know, what does it normally
body
cost? Like
work.
makeup day of show. Is that like 150 for them to come out normally? Do you know that?
I think it was 100 for what
Mm,
I did, but it was just makeup.
yeah. So like, okay, so makeup. I know like Nelly did like makeup. I know like some girls in makeup and hair, and I know that can be like 200 for the day.
Yeah,
Um, and like again, like suits can range from literally from like 500 to $1,200.
but I rented
Um,
mine, so it was only like
yeah.
130. So that's what you gotta
Yeah,
do.
which is the move. Honestly, like if you don't know, you're planning to keep progressing and keep growing, and you don't know what class you're going to
Right.
compete in, I strongly recommend renting. Especially, you probably want to change your color.
Right.
Yeah, so I think renting is definitely the move. How much are your heels, Brie?
Um, I went for the cheaper ones, but they're like 50. But if you go for like the shoe fairy, like actual ones, they're like 100 something, I think.
Yeah, so we're talking about 500. That's in before hair and makeup show day. Talking about like another $100 for heels.
Hmm.
And now we're talking about the Airbnb. And so like this is the thing I
Right.
talk about for a lot of people is that like if you don't live really close to the venue, I strongly recommend getting a hotel or Airbnb close to it because you do not want to be stressed out the Friday checking in. You do not want to be stressed out show day having to travel a lot because these things make a big difference on not only how you look but how you feel. And the thing about this is like those 2 days, timing of meals matter a lot. So you don't want to be stuck in traffic bitching that you can't eat.
Hmm.
Um, when we were driving to go do um, the Vince Manzoni show, Long Island Championships, we literally pulled over and stopped at Bev Francis Gym for tanning and so our clients could eat because how bad traffic was. Um, that's
Who's this
why
Ryan show?
this was well you oh sorry you
IG?
won. No, this was Brian G. Um, sorry PG and P Bruno.
Oh no, I was there.
You came after, remember? You were at
Oh,
work.
I came after yeah, because I had to close the store. So then
Yeah, so
I
we
left at 8
literally
and I got there at like 11.
it took 5 hours to get to that venue on Friday. So they were going to miss meals. So we literally went to we had to stop at Bev's anyway for tanning. So we stopped at Bev's first instead of going to the hotel so they could eat before tanning because they were so far behind on meals because of that. And that was as a prime example why I never do that. I always normally have the Airbnb starting that Thursday. So they can literally only wake up that day, do their shit, and get everything done that day. And then we're talking about Airbnbs, like that can range you for 3 days between being like 700 to 1,000 plus, depending on how big an Airbnb is. Now, granted, you can split that
How
with a
many
couple
people?
people.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
we paid like 300 each
yeah, something
for
like that.
Texas. But yeah, and we got it from Wednesday until Sunday night.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so it is very expensive to do this sport. And I will compare it to being in the cars or being really big in the firearms. Like it never gets cheaper. And the more advanced you get in the sport, the more expensive it becomes. And like I don't want to touch on PEDs too much, but we look at like the expensive like of growth hormone. Like it is very easy to spend $500 a month on growth. Very, very easy. And we're talking about at an amateur level. So we're talking about like 6K a year do just to one drug, not multiple, just one drug that you're spending on. So it can be very, very expensive. But the next thing is this sport gets more and more challenging the harder it is financially for you. So if you are working two jobs to afford doing this, getting your sessions of cardio in, fitting your meals in, and getting to sleep on a timely thing will only get more and more difficult. So I strongly recommend that if you are in a case where you are working multiple jobs or you do have multiple businesses like myself, that you try to find a way to time manage things so you can make sure to fit these things in and get to bed at a reasonable time because that will overwhelm you and that will burn you out. And the last thing you want to do is cut corners somewhere because at the end of the day, if you do not win that show, you will eat yourself up alive knowing that you cut corners somewhere because of work or something else. And that's not something I would ever want to live with, and I don't think any of you really want to live with that either. And
Oh yeah. Yeah, Big Cat, the one time the gym closed, I think it was like 2 weeks out of Big Cat, the gym closed a little bit early and I think I had like 15 minutes of cardio left and I texted you and I was like, well, I'm getting kicked out of the gym. I have 15 minutes left and they're closing. And then you told me that I was like, what are we gonna do? And Planet Fitness was closed. I can't go to the LA that's by my house. Homeboy's band, not my fault. But yeah, different story. Yeah, there was no gyms by me. I think the closest gym would have been Jersey Shore Fitness Shop, which would have been a 30-minute drive. So at that point, my heart rate would have already dropped. My
mm,
house is 6 minutes away. So I think you told me to go onto the treadmill for like 30 minutes and
yeah,
just double the time.
yeah, and that's the thing is that like, and that was a unique situation too. But we don't want to have to again like
Yeah, it's just a time
give up
management
somewhere
story.
else. Yeah, and we don't have to give up effort somewhere else to make sure we do this. And that's why also why like mentally this is super draining. So like those who have never prepped before, I want you to imagine your social circle of friends you have right now. And I want you to imagine if you're not in this lifestyle, I want you to imagine 75% of them disappearing. And that is contest prep. Because if you cannot go out and eat, you cannot go out and drink. And again, like my friend circle doesn't really do that, but they like to go out and eat and socialize or come over, have a bite to eat or do things or go do other things that you really can't always do in prep. So you have to say no to a lot of things. You have to say no to some birthday gatherings. You're going to have to say no to some family occasions. You may have to say no to your own birthday. Um, I remember on my first show getting ready, sorry, my second show I ever did, I was 21. I remember going to Dave and Buster's for my 21st birthday and bringing my own chicken. Um, because I wanted to play video games for my 21st birthday.
Nothing wrong
And
with that. I would do that.
yeah, right. But like, dude, like I know people who on a 21st birthday during prep went out and drank. Like, it's just a birthday, right? And nothing matters that much.
I think
So,
I
mhm,
think my 22nd birthday, you told me I can go out, but you said I can only have 2 drinks. And
yeah,
that was I think it was one drink and I was done. I was like,
yeah.
yep, I was like, I'm done for the night. And very short-lived night.
But the social media makes prep seem much more glamorous than it actually is. You're talking about waking up before any of your friends probably wake up. You're doing cardio and finishing it before anyone else wakes up. You're going out again like it's dark out and you're waking up doing that. Like it's kind of depressing getting in your car at like 5:30 a.m. in the morning, going to go do stairs when it's pitch black outside and fucking freezing. And then you're getting that done, you're coming home, you're shoving your meals in. You're obviously only eating the stuff that's on your plan, and you're going back later to do your lift and everything else. Your time socializing, your time with your friends greatly decreases throughout prep. And not even talking about just that, but how you feel, right? Like you shouldn't feel bad your whole entire prep, not by any means. But when things get closer, I always, for me, it's like the 8 week mark. The 8 week is where I actually know I'm in prep. Um, the first like 8 or 10 weeks, like I don't really notice it. Just I'm eating less food. I'm actually happy about it. But around like week 8, I'm actually starting to notice things from a cognitive perspective. I feel more cloudy. Like I'm not as sharp. I'm putting my keys in the fridge. Um, things like that. And obviously, as the food dials down and the activity goes up, you feel worse and worse and worse. This makes you feel more irritable, more moody, definitely more sensitive in general. And I
Butter
know both.
spills on you.
Yeah, right. Like the smallest things aggravate you.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about drug exposure yet, right? And a lot of some of the drugs used in contest prep, especially for a male, those I'm not going to specify any ones, but those in the 19 or category, are very neurotoxic drugs, and they can greatly impact things like anxiety. They can greatly impact depression. They can greatly impact things like aggression and mood and even suicidal thoughts because how neurotoxic they are. And so you can imagine combining things like that with low food intake, with being under a lot of stress that not only that you're probably putting on yourself because you're doing a show, but maybe stress you have on from your relationships at home, relationships with a significant other, possibly stress from work. So you definitely have to make sure that you're almost, I don't want to say zen-like, but zen-like before prep starts, because nothing gets easier during prep. Everything gets harder. So you definitely have to make sure that everything is peachy keen.
But
Yeah,
life
I think
also will continue to go on. So it's
Mhm.
never going to be a perfect scenario for, okay, like life's great, I can start. There's always going to be something that's stressful. There's always going to be, something that happens, but it's how you handle it. And you're also choosing to be in the prep. So that's another thing.
Yeah.
yeah, you choose to be in it. So I mean, you gotta handle what you got going on before anything.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's seriously a privilege to do and to be able to like afford it and to, wake up and be able to go to the gym and do all those things and still make time for that. So
Yeah. No, it really is. And that's why I like touching on like the emotional part of it. I am strongly against anyone ever taking out the emotional part of this on anyone outside of themselves.
mm,
Um, I have to say, when I did my very first bodybuilding show when I was 19, I remember being snippy as fuck um, to my ex at the time. And it was, I didn't, everyone, I've never dieted that hard because when I used to wrestle, I used to just not eat. And not eating is easier than doing a contest prep because you eventually just lose hunger cues after a while. It's like fasting, right? You eventually just don't get hungry anymore. But with bodybuilding, you're eating all the time, so hunger cues are always going. You're doing much more physical activity. You're working out more than once a day, so it's definitely aggravating that. But again, like Bree just said, it is a personal choice, and we have the privilege to do that. So if you are hangry or angry or whatever it is, like no one in your social circle, your friends, your relationships, your significant other should ever have to deal with that because it's a personal choice.
I agree. I mean, I do say I found myself where I get a little snippy at times. But I normally I catch myself pretty fast in it, but it's normally like just the stupidest things that just like set like if my lemon juice is put in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
That was like the biggest thing. My lemon juice being moved or my scale. If my scale just like randomly like it's like low battery and then I'm weighing something out and then it just dies. Oh, dude, I'd have to walk away for like 5 minutes because like I would get so pissed. But it was like something that's not movable. And it's like
Yeah.
it's just low battery. And it was just like at that point I was just like so deep in prep and I was like, I was like, of course now this has to happen. Like
Yeah. But again,
but
it's
it's
the
like
small
it's the
things that you
dumbest things that yeah, it's like the little tiny things. Nothing like huge. Because most of the time, like any of like the big things, I was just like, fuck it, whatever, who cares? Like
uh,
it's
the
not gonna it's
funny
not gonna affect me. It's not gonna affect me in 5 minutes. But this scale not measuring my food, this is really annoying me.
the funny thing about that is one of the things that we talk about in therapy is your frontal lobe, right? And so like that thought process is something so minute bringing us to that upset is literally just telling us that
It's
we're
so
not
funny.
using our frontal lobe at all to make this decision at all. This
No,
is
no.
100% all hypothalamus right now making this is all our
oh my
irrational.
gosh. Did
Is
you
that your
throw that?
mouse?
No, that's my Fitbit. My Fitbit's charging right
Okay.
now,
Oh.
and I didn't realize it was looped around my finger. So when I did this, it threw it.
Yeah, I mean that's normally what it is. It's like the tiniest little things is what sets people off in prep. And they don't and like you say things you don't mean and you
Mhm.
realize it after you already had said it because you're not thinking. You're not
Yeah,
using like Mark said, you're not using your frontal lobe at all. You're just reacting.
yeah,
So that's also like kind of I mean, I'll credit a little bit of some things from like me going to a mental hospital before I started bodybuilding and stuff like that and learning how to ground myself pretty well.
yeah,
Um I learned that and that definitely was probably one of the biggest things was grounding myself, especially with like anything that like kind of big came up during prep. I kind of was like, okay,
yeah.
this this is can be solved later. I
Exactly.
have this that I have to do.
Like I journaled all prep. I still do now, but not as much. But I journaled like almost every day. It was like every other day I made it. Like I
That's
had
similar too.
to.
I just found something that I like to do.
Yeah.
I think more so, I think I would during prep I buried myself more into learning. I mean, I still pretty buried into learning now, but I think I buried myself more into our clients at that point.
Hmm. Yeah, distractions,
Like it's
man.
yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that helped me stay distracted is when we had Connor, like when we had first gotten Connor, and he was like at and like kind of like mentoring him as like a big brother.
Yeah,
Because I remember I would send you like screenshots of like him like me and him like conversing back and forth, which was awesome.
yeah,
And like it
no,
was kind of like and like I kind of related it to how you are with me when I
mhm,
first started. And I mean it's still the same dynamic now, I would
yeah.
say, but
And no, it's interesting and it's fun to do, and it definitely again like it's rewarding at the same time, and it's also like again it's
oh yeah.
a pleasant distraction from the norm. But to keep us on subject, so I again like I know we've all known people who've prepped for shows who had not been really ready to prep for shows.
Mhm.
No, I'm not going to talk about anyone specifically when it comes to that. But the biggest thing that I'll talk about from a personal story reference, because we I'm sure we all have a bunch, is I know I have a personal friend of mine who's done women's physique. I want to say like maybe 5 years in a row. And she's competed every single year for about 5 years. Um, and not just one show, but maybe multiple shows a year.
Wow.
And a class like women's physique requires a lot of muscle to entry,
Mhm.
a lot. And this obviously typically is going to go with not even just obviously a really regimented diet and training program, but to get to that level and accrue that much muscle as a female, you're normally going to need a good amount of PEDs as well. Um, but this individual spends so much time dieting every single year that they don't really end up growing much each year. So the improvements from year to year are very, very minimal. And just because they're so focused on getting back on stage. And that's where like the person who loves the journey is going to get ultimately farther than the person who loves the destination.
Yeah.
And that's the sport. And this is why I will always say this is a marathon.
Mhm.
Because if you are so focused on the destination, you're never gonna be patient enough to do the things you have to do to be great.
Right.
But if you can fall in love with going to do your faster cardio, you getting your meals in, hitting new numbers in your logbook, like all small little things like that, the destination just fucking happens. Like you just goals just fucking happen. Everything just fucking happens because you're so focused on the progress. So for a personal story reference, like just making sure like yeah, you can be in love with being on stage, but you have to be in love with the process and be okay taking away time from the stage to focus on growth. Just like you're doing, Coleman, with this off season
Yeah.
this
I was
year.
about to say, yeah, like us making the decision to drop classic and really focus on growing to open after doing two shows in open and then seeing where I sit like physique wise and stuff like that. And then really I think I took November's when I competed and then we just made the decision
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, I think it was, or Monday.
Yep.
I think yeah, I took it 3 months to like really sit there and like let it digest and like think about where I really want to take myself to. And I know I'm not going to be able to do it within a year. I mean, even if we were to replicate the first off season I had where we put on 10 pounds of tissue everywhere, that's
Yeah.
not going to happen again realistically.
Yeah.
Could it? Yes. But realistically, no. Maybe I'll add 5 pounds of tissue in a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a realistic number.
Yeah. And that's the
And
thing. If you're watching this and you are just again basing things off numbers, at a true life scenario, we're talking about stage weight, right? Adding weight to stage weight. So we're talking about adding pure muscle in essence, right? So like you have a lot of people who will gain and fluctuate a bunch of weight throughout the year. And a lot of that's going to be some of that's gonna be fat, some of that's gonna be water, some of it's gonna be glycogen, some of it's gonna be inflammation. But when it comes down to what they actually weigh on stage, so this is the leanest and driest they will be. It'll be the closest to them being just muscle. So, and in our sport, we're talking about like on average, like, oh, I'll use Nick Walker for example, because Nick Walker at the moment has put on muscle faster than any human ever has in history at the moment. And they did the calculation that Nick Walker, since he's been competing, has put on an average of 1 pound of muscle every single month since he was 16 years old. That is crazy to think about. But
Yeah,
the
it's a
average
lot.
person, the average bodybuilder who is not Nick Walker and is not the top 1% of genetic elites are only probably putting on 5 to 7 pounds max a year of actual lean tissue. And we're talking about with PED usage.
Mhm.
Now, we are talking about the advanced lifter. We are not talking about the person the first 1 or 2 years in the gym. And that's a completely different scenario because weightlifting is a brand new stimulus. And kind of like your first time having a beer, that one beer did more for you than a beer does for you now. You going to the gym and doing 12 sets for your chest did way more work for you than doing 12 sets in the gym now, right? You need more stimulus to continually growing, and that's why progressive overload is one of the biggest things that's preached among this industry. But I'm very proud of you, Coleman, for you being able to put your ego aside and
Oh
focus
yeah.
on the bigger picture.
Yeah, I mean, it also comes down to conversations I've had with you, I've had with Bruce, uh, Victor, my uncle, having that conversation and him telling me like, this is probably the route you should go. And that was before like we even started prep. And he was like,
Mhm.
this is the route you should probably go. And it didn't really like register. I was like, yeah, I was like, I could kind of do both, trying to see where I fit. And then like, I mean, structurally wise and shape wise, I could go either way,
Mhm.
I believe. And that's what we've gotten from feedback from multiple judges is I can go either way with it. It's
Yeah.
just really picking where I want to go. And I don't want to keep sucking down weight. Like if I have to limit how much I can grow, like that's just not worth it in my opinion. Especially
Mhm.
if I have to downsize certain areas like at certain points, like just to fit in a weight cap,
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
at that point, at that point, then we're risking health issues. And that's the biggest thing. And because I'm not blessed with height.
Yeah.
If I had that half an inch to make me 5'10", we could definitely do it. 205 for a cap would be perfect, but
Mhm.
190 to 197 if I get heighted wrong, that's 7 pounds I have to play with and sit underneath
Yeah.
just in case I get heighted wrong.
And that should be something that over time the NPC should just kind of make a concrete rule that once you get heighted, and that's your height. Um, because like again, like that's unfortunate. Like 7 pounds is a lot to play with,
A
especially
lot of tissue.
a lot of tissue. No, it really is.
Yeah.
Bree, you being a female, I'm sure you have a lot of experiences and stories in the sector.
with growing or
Oh no, with just with the topic in general.
um so I mean I've seen it a lot with people wanting to fit in a certain category.
Mhm.
Um and I mean I feel like I did it myself as well. Um with coming to you and saying, look, like I want to compete in August. And um I mean I'm looking back at pictures and realizing like like I don't know, like I definitely could have, I should have
They're both.
took more time. Um, but, yeah.
So there's a phrase I like to say often, and it's something. It's you give people what you tell people what they want, but you give them what they need,
Mhm.
right? And this is why I let a lot of people do some things because at the end of the day, what normally is going to happen is they're going to realize that the way that I want you to do it, you never vocalize, is going to be the way you're going to eventually do it.
Mhm.
And the thing is like this for the example with that. If I told you, Bree, absolutely not. We're not doing that show. You'd be like, yo, fuck this guy, Coleman. Fuck Mike. and
I don't know about that. I tend to typically agree with most things you say, especially when it
No,
No,
comes
but
down to like when
he's
somebody.
saying for me.
yeah, Bree would have been like, I'm gonna go find someone else. Fuck Mark. I'm gonna find. I want to compete in August. And like, you know what? Like, a lot of people respond that way, and
Oh
so
yeah,
and that's why when people come to us and want to do a show, I normally, unless it's unrealistic, I normally say okay,
Yeah.
because I understand that the first show they may not look the way I want them to look,
Mhm.
and they may not be to their fullest potential,
Right.
but
It's definitely a
they will
learning
realize,
experience. Yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
And I understood that your first show that you did wasn't the very best scenario.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to make a difference and, for example, give you a way of how a prep should be run.
Mhm.
And now you know how prep should go. So like
Yeah.
when we do your next show, you're fully aware of how your prep should feel and how you should feel during it and all of that. But yeah, a lot of us rush prematurely into a class. And could you have fit in both classes? Yeah, you could have done bikini and wellness at your last show. But
Mhm.
you know what? You do have a silhouette for wellness. Um, could you have posed in a way in bikini that you've done could have done bikini? Totally. Just like there's tons of male bodybuilders who can put on shorts and do men's physique.
Yeah.
Um, doesn't mean that one's better than the other by any means.
no,
It's how you pose. There's literally
Right.
been women that have won bikini, figure, and wellness all in the same show, won 3 pro cards. So like, if
it happened
people,
in Universe.
yes, so if people can do that,
True.
you could have done what you did.
True. Yeah.
I'm talking about like at a national level that happens. Like
Yeah.
women win 3 pro cards.
Yeah, and that's just based off like you can create an illusion based off your posing. That's
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
another big thing. That's another added expense too. I mean, to go all the way back to that, you gotta have a posing coach. You're
Yeah.
only you're only as good as the how good you can pose. And
Yeah.
if you have someone who can outpose you, there's a high chance you could have a top 10 physique. But if this guy can outpose you and hold his stuff a lot better and make it look more fluid,
Yeah.
you're gonna get beat.
Yeah. Because you can work your ass off and look 10 times better, but if you can't display your
You have
physique
to
in
present
the
it well.
way, yeah.
Who is it? Who is that fucking Christoph from who's moved to the IFBB? Like
Oh, Crizzo?
Chris, yes, he is
Yes.
by far the worst poser I've ever seen on the Olympia stage. By
But
far.
he's massive.
But yes, he has a top tier
An
physique.
amazing physique. Amazing physique. His
Worst
back shots
poser.
are awful. His back shots are his weakest. His front
And
shots are perfect.
he can't hold a pose. He shakes a lot. He sweats a ton. Like these are all things that, again, even at the highest level, posing is extremely important. And would he have placed maybe one position higher if he posed a little better? Possibly. And
I don't
like,
think he beats Ian there.
I don't know.
That's
Maybe
that's
like,
just my opinion. That's my
I
opinion.
don't
I
think
don't think he
I
beats
don't think
Ian.
he has a better physique than Ian, but maybe if he posed a little better, maybe he would have beat him
Oh
somewhere.
yeah.
But again, like the biggest thing is that when it comes to a sport that is display oriented, which is literally all our sport is display oriented, that trying to create the best illusion is going to be the best way to win. So if you do not work with a posing coach, please work with a posing coach, because I promise you, having someone else look at you is better than you looking at you, because we all fucking like ourselves.
Yeah.
Like we are in a sport that literally gives you body dysmorphia. So I
Yeah.
promise whatever you see is not what anyone else fucking sees, good or
Yeah.
bad.
100%. Yeah.
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 Yeah. I mean, that's another thing.
I mean, because I
Yeah.
thought I was
That's
way bigger than than I actually was, and now I'm like, Mark, just take the reins. Tell me when I'm competing next. I don't even like. I
I love it. I love it.
cups are better. Just like spoons are better. Spoons over forks. Yep. I can't eat with a fork anymore. There's not enough room to fit up my food on it.
You know what it is? I get so angry at rice when the grains fall between the fork that like
Yep. Or it gets stuck in it.
Yeah,
It
I
gets
get
stuck in it and you can't get it out. Yeah.
I have never had rice get stuck in a fork and couldn't get it out.
Well, I made my rice a little crispy the one time and it got stuck in there and it wouldn't come out. So I
You're
had one
just
grain
crunching on
less.
rice.
I like crunching on rice. There's nothing wrong with that. It has a little texture to it.
Bree, I wish you could have tasted Connor's rice.
Oh
I'm
no,
glad I
that
didn't, but
rice,
I did taste Kenny's
no.
chicken, and that was
You did?
terrible.
Okay.
You
Well,
remember
Oh,
that?
Brock doesn't season his food. We had to convince Brock after 4 months to start seasoning his food.
so I am just convinced that everyone who lives west of us, until they get to like, I don't know, California, don't know how to cook their food. I'm just convinced. And the reason why I say this is every single client I've ever had from the Midwest, every single one, without doubt, has never seasoned their food. Ever.
Oh, Sarah too. Yes, Sarah didn't season any of her food.
So
She asked us after like I think it was like a month. She's like, "Am I allowed to use seasonings?" And we were like, "It's on the plan. Like
yeah.
you can use seasonings. Like just make sure it fits in the calorie number and it doesn't have sugar in it."
So I am agreeing with every single meme about white people, but I'm going to say that Italians do not fall under white people. I'm being very, very clear about this.
Yeah.
But no white person from west of New Jersey seasons their food. I'm convinced. Because not a single one of my clients have ever seasoned their food who happen to be white. I'm just throwing it out there. They just throw condiments on it and call it a day. They don't season, they don't marinate, they don't saute, they don't sous vide, they don't broil, they don't do any of that. Braise, literally just throw chicken in a pan and a little salt because it's in the plan and they do it. I guarantee you I didn't put salt in the plan. People wouldn't salt the food either.
No, probably not.
Nope, and no one would salt their food. They wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Then we'd have a lot of sodium issues.
Yeah. Pick it apart, Mark. Why? All right. On that note, do we actually have it? All right, cool. So hey, I appreciate you all watching Coaching Corner today. If you have any questions for any of us here, please shoot us a DM, or you can shoot an email to mvpcontestprep@gmail.com. I'm gonna answer any inquiries there. But until next time, guys, take care.